We're going to talk about the man who built the TR-808. He has such a fascinating story, and it's not just about this one drum machine, this one instrument that has elevated music and has taken it to several levels since then. But we're going to talk about the man who made it and so many other things that he created and has done that completely shaped the music landscape. His name is Ikutaro Kakehashi. The 808 became an iconic staple in popular music, and his whole life was a series of things that went wrong, but he found a way through it all. This is Modernote. Let's get into it. So here's where Ikutaro's story begins. He was born in 1930 in Osaka, Japan, and right off the bat, he had a hard time. Both of his parents died of tuberculosis when he was only 2 years old. And this is something which I can't imagine how he felt as a kid, not having his two parents. He was raised by his grandparents on Kyushu, which is a rural island in the southwest of Japan. Now, think about what that means. This is between two world wars. Japan is about to head to a second war, and he's an orphan. Not only that, resources are limited, and he's growing up on an island that's far from the tech center or any creative community. This kid grew up in pretty much farmland. When Ikutaro was a kid, he was drawn to how things worked. In high school, during the Second World War, he was building his own shortwave radios. He couldn't buy them, so he wanted it so bad, he built them. He was obsessed with sound from the beginning. After the war ended, he tried to get into a university and he was rejected. So, around 16 or 17 years old, he did the only thing he could. He started a business. He opened up the Kakehashi watch store and he repaired watches and clocks and started to repair radios too. Now, before this, he was a land surveyor part time, which allowed him to meet a bunch of residents on the island. And so he got a lot of his clients at the watch store through the land surveying job. Then at age 20, Ikutaro got tuberculosis. And this is the same disease that killed his two parents. So he ended up at a place called Sengokuso Sanitarium, and he was there for about 3 or 4 years. What he did during this time tells us everything about who he was. While he was at the hospital, he was confined to a bed, but he kept working. He was repairing watches and radios for the hospital staff and other patients. He needed the money to survive because his savings were running out. But he also did something else. He heard about a new invention called the television. So what did he do? He ordered parts and built his own TV receiver from the hospital so he could listen to NHK's early broadcasts. So he's in this ward and he built a television. And he got really lucky. The hospital selected him to be the first patient to receive an experimental drug called, I think, streptomycin. The injections were extremely painful, but they worked. His condition improved, and eventually he recovered. Years later, he had a great line about this whole period. He said he graduated from the electronics departments of Sengokuso University with a specialty in music. He turned a 3-year hospital stay into his education. Now, this reminds me of when we talked about Robert Rodriguez, for example. Robert had no film school and he didn't have connections or money. And he said that not knowing the rules was actually an advantage because he didn't know enough to talk himself out of trying it. Ikutaro was the same. He didn't go through a formal program. He taught himself. And the foundation that he built there was something he carried for the rest of his life. So after this recovery, Ikutaro threw himself into music. By 1959, he had built his first electronic organ, a 49-key monophonic instrument, and he designed it with a specific purpose. He wanted it to be playable by anyone, even people with no musical training. That idea stuck with him for the next 50 years. He wanted to make music accessible to everyone. In 1960, he founded a company called Ace Tone. They made organs and rhythm machines. And by 1964, he created something called the FR1, FR-1, Rhythm Ace. The FR1 was an early drum machine. It had a bunch of presets and patterns and manual sound buttons. For example, like a cymbal and claves, cowbell, bass drum. Now, there's this other company called the Hammond Organ Company. When they got notice about this new invention, they liked it and decided they wanted to form a partnership with Ace Tone. So they did in 1967. Hammond started selling the Rhythm Ace. And this was a huge deal because Ikutaro's little Japanese company was now connected to one of the biggest names in American music. But then he had to walk away from Ace Tone because their largest investor was bought out by a major industrial group. So even though Ikutaro founded the company, he became essentially a junior partner of his own business. And because he was now a minority shareholder, he had no power. So he walked away and he had to start all over again. So if we go back to the timeline, which is crazy, he was an orphan at age 2. By the time he wanted to go to the university, he got denied. He nearly died of tuberculosis, and then he spent years in a hospital because of it. He built a company from scratch and then loses the company. In 1972, at age 42, he started the Roland Corporation in Osaka. So he was starting over and he started this new company called Roland. Roland's first product was the TR-77, the rhythm box. And then came the SH-1000, which was the first compact synthesizer in Japan. Ikutaro was on a roll. He kept building. He built keyboards, guitars, amps, effects pedals, drums. Now, also in 1973, Ikutaro founded the Boss Corporation. If you're a guitarist, if you play music, you're definitely familiar with Boss pedals. And if you're not a guitarist, essentially a pedal is exactly that. It's a little box, it's a little pedal that you run your guitar cable through in order to create popular effects or even some unusual sounds from your guitar. Your guitar is connected to the pedal is connected to the amplifier, where the amplifier speakers output the sound. He was building a whole musical arsenal, putting instruments into the hands of musicians that couldn't afford to use a studio. And then in 1980 came the TR-808, the rhythm composer. And here's how the 808 came to be. Roland's engineer, Tadao Kikumoto, was leading the design, and the team decided to use analog synthesis instead of digital sampling. Digital sampling would have meant recording real drum sounds and playing them back, but the memory chips were too expensive at the time, so they went analog. And they used electrical currents to create drum sounds from scratch. So they were making sounds instead of sampling them. Now, to create the 808's unique sound, specifically those crispy hi-hats and cymbals, Ikutaro needed a specific kind of transistor. About 2 to 3% of transistors coming off the manufacturing line had a defect. They were creating this sizzling, noisy sound that most companies would just throw away. Ikutaro bought those. He went to companies like Toshiba and Panasonic to purchase their defective transistors on purpose. He took what those companies considered to be trash and turned those sounds into the signature sound of the 808. That kick drum, that deep, thunderous, low frequency that could shake a building, the hissing hi-hats, cowbell, all of it came from parts that were never supposed to work. Now, if we stop to think about it, here's arguably the most influential drum machine in the history of pop music, and it was built on defective parts. So this is a good lesson about constraints. He used those to his advantage and to create the iconic sounds that he produced. People criticized and said the sounds didn't sound like real drums, that they were too synthetic, too artificial, while others worried that it would replace real musicians. Sounds like a common issue when it comes to new technology. Right now we're going through this AI revolution, and we've got a group of people who are on one end of the spectrum saying that this is the biggest thing since sliced bread, and then we've got the opposite who are saying, everything's doomed because of AI. I tend to think, along the center, like, I don't think it's like the greatest thing ever, nor do I think it's the great, I don't know, destroyer. But it's just another tool, more technology, and it's helpful if you know how to use it. It's not so helpful if you don't. So it's kind of funny drawing those parallels uh, in present time that we constantly go through as we evolve in technology. So the 808 launches in 1980. It retailed for about 1,200 bucks, and right away the response was rough. So the 808 fell between two worlds. It wasn't realistic enough for traditional musicians, and it wasn't polished enough for electronic producers. By 1983, Roland had to pull it. They only sold about 12,000 units. And there was another reason why it had to stop. Semiconductor manufacturing was improving, but the defective transistors that were a positive for the 808 sound were impossible to find. The factories were making better parts, which meant that that flawed sound no longer existed. Now, there's an 808 documentary, and I highly recommend it. Ikutaro said in that documentary that there was no way to come back. So the 808 was done, it was finished. But then here's what happened next. When established musicians gave up on the 808, they sold them at secondhand stores or pawn shops, and the price dropped from 1,200 to 100, sometimes even less. And now, all of a sudden, this machine was affordable to a completely different group of people. Young musicians in poor urban areas, kids in Chicago, Detroit, New York. They couldn't afford a studio, they couldn't afford real drums, but they could definitely afford an 808. Producers started making electro, techno, house, acid, and hip hop that sounded nothing like anyone had heard before. In 1982, Arthur Baker used the 808 to produce Planet Rock by Africa Bambaataa and the Soul Sonic Force. That track reached the Billboard charts and helped kick off hip hop's golden era. Marvin Gaye used it for sexual healing. He pretty much fled to this small town in Belgium called Ostend to escape problems here in the States. So he surrounded himself with a bunch of synthesizers and drum machines, and he was just pushing and playing these instruments. And with the 808, recorded what became his biggest hit in years. The 808 went from failed product to the backbone of modern music. Whitney Houston's I Want to Dance with Somebody, Madonna's Vogue, the Beastie Boys, Licensed to Ill, Outkast, the list keeps going. And the machine that made it all possible was built by an orphan from a rural Japanese island using parts that no one else wanted. Now, here's another part of Ikutaro's story that I wanted to touch base on because it connects to what we talk about here. Documentation. Ikutaro wrote 2 books. The first was called I Believe in Music. This was published in 2002. This book is a little bit hard to find, but if you could find it, the book covers his life from the wars to his watch repair shop to the invention of his instruments. The other book is called An Age Without Samples. That one came out in 2017, the same year he died. And what stands out is that he recorded everything. He recorded his process, his failures, his partnerships. He documented his journey. All right, so here's something that I think is very fascinating. Um, and it happened because Ikutaro believed in something bigger than just selling drum machines and synthesizers. In the early 1980s, there was a problem with electronic instruments. For example, a keyboard from Roland couldn't connect to a keyboard from another company. Every manufacturer had their own system, and if you bought gear from different brands, they just couldn't connect. It's kind of hard to see that today because we could connect so many instruments, we could just plug them into a computer. There are several ways of doing it nowadays. Someone by the name of Dave Smith, who was the president of Sequential Circuits, which was a competitor, had an idea. He thought, what if there is a universal language that connects all electronic instruments? So Dave approached Ikutaro about it. These are two companies that are competing for the same customers and offered to partner up to connect their instruments. So Ikutaro said yes. And in 1983, at the NAMM show, which is the largest trade show in the music industry, they did a public demonstration of a Roland Jupiter 6 connected to a sequential circuit's Prophet 600. And this was for the first time, so I could only imagine how blown away people were. Craziest thing that I didn't know this about Ikutaro is that he and Dave both built the MIDI, the musical instrument digital interface, or MIDI for short. If you play music, you probably heard a MIDI about MIDIs. You've probably connected a MIDI to, say, a laptop or desktop computer. It's amazing. Ikutaro played a major role in creating the MIDI. So today, every time you plug into a keyboard or a laptop or connect a drum pad, you're using MIDI, and it's become the backbone of modern music production. And in 2013, Ikutaro and David Smith received the Technical Grammy Award for it. This is 30 years after they first connected those two machines. Here's what sticks with me. Ikutaro spent his entire life making things that people didn't understand, at least not at first. He built rhythm machines or drum machines in the 1960s, the 808 in 1980, MIDI in 1983. He wound up building another company called ATV Corporation, and his final project at this new company was something called the A-frame. And what it was an electronic hand drum. He built this when he was 87 years old, still building instruments. In his autobiography, he wrote something I keep coming back to. He said that music is as old as the shepherd with his panpipes, but now it is as new as the space age. So that's kind of the tension that he lived in, ancient meeting the new at the same time, pushing on to the soul of music while pushing technology forward. All right, as we wrap up Ikutaro Kakehashi today, here are some takeaways. Use what others throw away. For example, the 808 sound came from defective transistors. The 808's sound came from defective transistors. These are parts that other companies discarded. Ikutaro saw the value where no one else did. Now, you and I are surrounded by material that other people have given up on. And these could be ideas, tools, also experiences. The raw material for something great might already be in your hands. We just have to look for it and find the right angle. Start over if you have to. Ikutaro lost his first company. The business he built from nothing was taken from him because of a partnership deal. And instead of quitting, he started the Roland Company at age 42. And he went on to change the way music is made and the music sounds around the world. Starting over is not a sign that you failed. It's only proof that you're not done. Failure is an advantage. There's a silver lining to failure. When the 808 flopped, the price went down, practically crashed. And that crash put the machine in the hands of people who actually needed it. And these were underground musicians who created entire new genres with it. Sometimes the thing you made has to fail before the right audience finds it. Your job isn't to control who picks it up. Your job's to make it and put it out into the world. Document everything. Ikutaro wrote 2 books. He recorded his process, his decisions, and his setbacks. Because of that, we don't just have the 808 or the other inventions that he created. We have the story of how it was made and why. So write it down. Whatever you're building, keep a record. You'll need it later in ways you can't even predict right now. Build for others, not just for yourself. The story of how the MIDI was made, that one still gets me. 2 competitors who chose to build a universal standard instead of protecting their own advantage. Ikutaro gave away his control because he believed the music mattered more than his market share. And that decision changed the entire industry. The thing you're building might serve a purpose bigger than you planned. Ikutaro Kakehashi passed away April 1st, 2017. He was 87. He started his life as an orphan on a quiet island. He survived the disease that killed his parents, and he built a television from a hospital bed. He lost his company and he started again. He turned factory rejects into the sound of modern music and gave competitors a reason to work together. He once said that there was no way to come back, talking about the 808 and defective transistors. But the machine came back anyway. It just took a different path than anyone expected. And that's the lesson underneath all this. You can't always control what happens to the thing you make, but you can keep making, you can keep documenting, and you can trust that sometimes the failure is just the beginning. Thank you for watching and listening. If you come this far, please like and subscribe to this so more people could find it. This is Modernote. My name's Caesar, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks.